Coming up next is on the repeal of the cannabis ban is Ben. Please come. Make sure I got to make sure that he talks like me. Good morning, Denver, Colorado. Good morning. My name is Benjamin, and I've lived in this city for 53 years. I've been here long enough that I remember when the Bears met in baseball. They played over at Mile High Stadium. I also remember when the Rockies met hockey and they played at McNichols Sports Arena. I also remember when the basketballs were red, white, and blue and they played at the Auditorium Arena. The reason I mention those things is a lot of the money that should have been spent on housing, we spent on these new sports stadiums. Now the city bought 2 new sports stadiums when they didn't have to, because there's another sports stadium that was brought by a private person and they do just fine. So, with that, homelessness has wound up increasing over the years, and the city's response has not been to build new housing. The city's response has been to tear down the housing and replace it with more expensive units. And in order to hide their mistake, they passed this thing called the urban camping ban. Now about 6 months after the urban camping ban was passed, we went out and we asked our homeless community, so like, how's this working out? The city promised many things. They promised a 24-hour rest and resource center. They promised more shelter. They promised more housing. And when we talked to the homeless community about how it was affecting them, we were asking them questions like, are you getting more sleep or less? Do you feel safer or less? Is it easier to get into the shelters or harder? Well, all the answers were they felt less safe, they were getting less sleep, and it was harder to get into the services, and the 24-hour rest and resource center never showed up. So the camping ban has been a failure because ever since it's passed, homelessness just continues to increase. One of the problems about getting repeal on this is our city officials do not want to talk to the homeless community. They would rather talk to developers who have a lot to gain by overpricing things. When it comes to development in this city, it's not about a reasonable rate of return. It's always about a maximum rate of return. And so there's been no pushback from city council to dial these developers back to projects that would be a reasonable rate of return. And as such, housing has become incredibly expensive in this city. And more people wind up out on the street. And then people want to talk like it's the fault of people who are working 2 or 3 jobs. 70% of the homeless community, according to the coalition, is working right now, and it's not adding up to housing.
70%.
So we need to repeal this camping ban. Here's an example of when your response to people being stuck out in the street is just to move them around. A few months ago, maybe you guys remember the rather large suite they had over at the rescue mission where they called out the hazmat team and closed down the street and whatnot. Well, when they broke up that camp, several of those people moved into some nearby neighborhoods. Well, the neighbors began to complain, but their complaints were like, well, people are using our alleys and stuff for bathrooms and there's trash. Could you bring us trash cans? And could you bring us porta potties? So the neighbors were asking for help for the people that had joined them in their neighborhoods. But the city's response was to sweep those communities that were just trying to hang on out of the area, out of sight, out of mind. That has been Denver's policy for at least 25 years. Push them out of sight, out of mind. I'm going to note a research report that was published in Sage magazine just a few months ago. It's called Move on Denver. And the strategy is to move homeless people either into warehouses so they can't be seen or out of sight and just push them off through law enforcement. You can look it up. It's on Sage magazine. It's called Move on Denver. And that is the policy of the city. They won't tell you that publicly. Now, when we take a look at the kinds of dollars that we are addressing our housing with, it's like bringing a nickel to a high-stakes poker game. I mean, they are not investing that. Over 10 years, they have like $300 million that's invested in that. That's like $30 million a year. That's a drop in the bucket. This is $1 billion housing issue that the city needs to invest in, and they won't step into it. But the first place to start is to repeal the camping ban. Because we are showing folks that are living out on the streets that we care about them and that we respect them and that they need some place to go. And it'll also start the conversation about what looks reasonable. Because right now, since no place is legal and no place is safe, nobody's having a conversation that this is okay in this situation and this is not okay in this situation. We live in a city where we have cars parking on public spaces all over the place. But we have rules about how that happens. And it's organized. And nobody gets scared when there's a car parked in front of their house because it's legal. We should be able to do the same thing for our homeless community when they get stuck outside. It's going to take 5, 10, 20, 30 years to get catch up with the housing problem. So there's going to be people outside, and we need to show respect for our homeless community, and it starts with repealing the camping ban. Thank you.
Right now,